Hi, it's great to be here. And I'm going to be following up on some of the things you've been discussing in past weeks with Daniel and Mo. And let's see, I can share my, if I could have screen sharing capabilities, that would be great. I have a few slides and pictures and resources to share. But I'll be focusing on worker co-ops, stories about worker co-ops, mostly from Worcester area where I'm based. I live in Grafton. I've been a part of several startup cooperatives, mostly worker cooperatives. I'm a member of Future Focus Media Co-op and part of a land-based project called Global Village, where we're helping co-ops get started. So let me start this presentation. And all right. So, and I work with the U.S. Federation's co-op clinic, where we're peer mentors from all across the U.S. who are part of co-ops, and we help other co-ops get started. So I'm just going to share some stories and going to talk about conversions, about converting businesses to cooperatives, some failures we've been through, some tools, movement nodes. Feel free to chime in with questions, comments, put it in the chat, or unmute yourself and chime in. And so I started a while back with a group of youth in Worcester. We built this project called the Toxic Soilbusters. This is the first kind of in-depth co-op project I was involved in. And co-ops exist to meet the needs of their members and their communities. And here with this group of youth, there was the need for clean soil in Worcester. So a lot of lead chips off houses and gets into the soil. It's hard to do your backyard gardening, your community gardening. I know it's the same in a lot of neighborhoods in Boston. And so we needed a low-cost way, instead of doing big excavation projects, to get the soil clean. So we came together, a group of youth, and we formed the Toxic Soilbusters, and we used plants that, as they grow, pulled the lead out of the soil, accumulated it. We could harvest the plants safely. We did other lead-safe landscaping techniques. We did theater, as you can see. We got up in Ghostbusters kind of uniforms to get the word out, to use some theatrical techniques and media events. And we ended up, testing hundreds of yards, remediating dozens and dozens of yards in community gardens. And so this group of youth met the need of clean soil and of youth jobs. They were connected to a nonprofit, but had their whole autonomous co-op going, where they would contribute $20 at the beginning of the summer. And if the co-op did well at the end of the year, they would decide their own bonuses and profit sharing. And they had seats on the board of the nonprofit to ensure that they had their full autonomy. And yeah, we got the statistical lead poisoning levels in Worcester when we started. We're at 16 poisonings a year and many elevations. And then when we wrapped up 10 years later, it was down to a statistical 0 poisonings in Worcester. We worked with a whole coalition on de-leading houses too. But anyway, so that group kind of morphed into another co-op called the Worcester Youth Cooperative now. But that was it's a great one to start with, because it really shows the creativity and that principle that co-ops exist to meet needs. So I'm gonna actually stop sharing for a sec and just hear, maybe if people want to shout out or put in the chat what needs they're seeing in their community that they're thinking about for co-ops, or things you're doing. If you're a graphic designer, just throw that out. Or if you're thinking about some sort of need or business idea, what's percolating. Go ahead and shout out.
Hi, my name is Lorraine. I'm actually doing a business plan right now for a grocery store, and it's more like a brick and mortar brick and mortar farmers market with a grocery store attached, where you have urban farmers who come together and sell their produce for local prices, and have actually healthy foods and organic foods that actually come together in a brick and mortar type of location. So that's an idea that I'm trying to form and building a business plan for.
Great. Grocery co-ops, I see. Affordable housing. Anyone else want to shout a few words? Things they're thinking about? Okay, well, internet, electricity, energy. Yeah, pretty much anything that our community needs, we can find a cooperative solution to, right? And I'm going to share a few more examples of ones that we've done here in Worcester or around Massachusetts. And feel free to chime in with other questions. So Future Focus Media Co-op is another one I'm a member, owner of, and we're a youth adult partnership. So it's another youth infused one where we do video production, graphic design, photography, and we do a summer youth training institute. And then if youth are really engaged in that and want to stay on, they have a job in the fall and they get on for paid gigs as we go out to different movement organizations and nonprofits and help them tell their stories through digital media. And then if they stay engaged through that, they can get on a membership track and become member owners of the cooperative business and have profit sharing rights and everything like that. So we're doing this in Worcester and in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where one of our founders is from. And it's just been great. Like 3 of our 5 member owners right now are youth. The president of our board is in his early 20s. And we, are able to really do the education and the work in the cooperative and help tell the stories. Another co-op we've been working with here in Worcester and help them support is Access Consulting Co-op. They actually work regionally, Providence, Boston, Worcester. They do language justice, so not just interpreting and translation, but really the training and the advocacy and the education work that's needed to make true multilingual spaces, right, where people can speak in the languages that they feel most comfortable in, where there can be use of interpreting equipment and other techniques, the educating of movement organizations so they can create these spaces. This is a co-op that's all women of color, immigrant-owned co-op, and they do mostly Spanish, but lots of other languages in their broader network. Woo Rides is another one that does sustainable transportation. They started with pedicabs and now have an electric van. And so this is just a sample. We have about 12 co-ops in Worcester that are connected through a network. This is a sample of a few of them. Almost all of them are Black, Indigenous, people of color led, but they're not only led by folks, but they're connected to racial justice movements, each of them in their own different way. This one, Woo Rides, for example, is founded by people from Muslim Community Link that are doing racial justice work in the Muslim community, and a whole broad range of them. And then Works Printing Co-op is another one that's really done well recently and it's grown. They do direct-to-textile printing. So full color, full imagination kind of printing onto garments for the most part, but they also do mugs and buttons and a few other things. But they've built out this huge printing space on a second floor of a warehouse in Worcester. And they're a union co-op. So they're a union shop and a worker co-op. So they're owned by their worker owners, but they've also decided to be a union shop. And let me just explain a little bit how that works. A lot of it comes from the model that's been proven to work for many years in Mondragon, in the Basque region of Spain, where they've had worker councils. And the basic idea is you can have ownership through workers, but you also have a collective bargaining unit. You also have protection for workers, another layer of protection for workers, and you're connected to the labor movement in a more concrete way, being organized. So steel workers, United Steelworkers is really active with Mondragon and building this out in the US with a project called One Worker, One Vote. They have a website, #1worker1vote.org. And they're doing a lot of stuff in Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio, and Los Angeles and elsewhere. And through a union, you can be involved in the broader advocacy in that industry, like people are doing in home care in New York or child care in Chicago. SEIU is very active in a few places. So unions are a great ally to worker co-ops, and they have resources for startup. They have grievance procedures, health plans, lots of things that can help us in getting co-ops going. So consider teaming up. And the U.S. Federation, we have a council that meets monthly and discusses how people are working with unions. So you can check that out at unioncoops.org. So that's another co-op we have going. And let me just go over a little bit on the different co-op development models, how people are starting worker co-ops and other types of co-ops in the US. A lot of them are linked to nonprofits, and nonprofits kind of exist to incubate cooperatives. Worcester Roots does that here in Worcester. There's a group in Jackson, Mississippi called Cooperation Jackson that has a whole Black liberation background and movement connection, and their economic justice arm is doing co-op development. And so they've gotten grants and has acted as fiscal sponsors and supported, had staff support for a network of worker co-ops that are, they started with 3 that kind of worked in concert. So they had a cafe, and the cafe's food waste went into a compost co-op, and the compost co-op provided compost for a farming co-op, and the farming co-op provided the food for the cafe. And it was a cyclical, startup of cooperatives. So check out Cooperation Jackson if you're interested in that model at all. And then there's Center for Family Life is another great one in Brooklyn that has started dozens of immigrant-led co-ops in New York City that do childcare, home care, house cleaning, and they've provided all sorts of support and training, and then really just kind of let those co-ops become fully autonomous. So that incubation model is a really key one. And then there's networks of co-ops that do incubation too, like the Valley Alliance for Worker Cooperatives in Western Mass have helped start some co-ops. Worker centers have acted as incubators of co-ops. So it's a really good model when there can be a connection and ongoing support, and they can get some grant funds behind it to get started. Another model of co-op development we see a lot is franchise model, where there's a lot of independence in each co-op, but they're linked through some common branding and resources. So one example is Arizmendi Bakeries in the Bay Area. If you've ever been to a pizza shop or bakery in the Bay Area, good chance is that you went to a worker co-op because Arizmendi. Cheese Board is one of them. A lot of them are named Arizmendi, who was founder of the Mondragon worker co-ops in the Basque region. So they've built up enough resource to have some staff to help other bakeries and pizza shops get started. So that franchise model is a really cool one too. And then a lot of people are doing co-op academies or accelerators. I'll be talking a little bit more about those later on, but that's basically getting, you know, crash courses or other resources to really get your co-op going. And there's lots of resources on that I'll be sharing. And then you could also not be directly affiliated with any network or nonprofit or academy or accelerator, but you could have a really strong idea and then go out and find developers, co-op developers that can support you and have the technical assistance knowledge that you're looking for, and finding the consultants. I think Cerro Co-op in Boston did it this way. They, you know, had a great sounding team and had a good network of Boston worker co-ops, and but also, you know, went out and found the developers that they needed, the consultants they needed to get that awesome project off the ground. So one thing we do, you know, suggest is to not try to do it go on your own. You know, connect with either another co-op in your industry through this peer network we have, the Co-op Clinic, or a nonprofit that can support you, or some, you know, another part of this model. So those are the main models of co-op development we're seeing that are being effective in the U.S. And here we have some graduates of our co-op academy that we've run since 2013 in Worcester. We've had some folks from Boston come out. We've done some virtual sessions as well. And not every co-op idea gets off the ground, but people get soaked in all the knowledge and resources that you need to really get your cooperative going. And so here are some graduates that had ideas of a cafe community center mix, of a auto appraisal cooperative, of a transportation co-op for formerly incarcerated folks. So so some of those are still in the works, and some, you know, are still in the idea phase. But we've graduated these cohorts, and they kind of stick together and keep in touch each year. And this year, I'm no longer at Worcester Roots, the incubator, but the staff there are considering doing one focused on movements that are or on co-ops that are connected to Black liberation movements, and specifically in the Black community. So that's a resource to check out, worcesterroots.org. So let me talk a little bit about conversions next. So conversions, basically, when we talk about that, it means businesses that already exist, be they sole proprietors or corporations, that are interested in converting to a cooperative model. So that can mean co-ops where there's a founder, a sole proprietor that already has a co-op and they want to grow and stay in the business. So we've done a couple of those in Worcester. One, for example, is a brewery called Three Cross. That's a bike-themed brewery, and microbreweries are doing really well. And this one, you know, was doing well for about 2 or 3 years, and they wanted to grow, and they wanted some more community buy-in. So they converted to a multi-stakeholder co-op, it's called, where the workers have say in the day-to-day operations, the brewing of the beer, the operations of the tap room, but they have community ownership too, where they can have elect people to be on the board of this co-op and make some decisions about as consumer owners, and they pay a one-time membership fee that provides great equity for the co-op to be able to grow and have certain ownership and dividends based on how much you purchase from the cooperative. So that's a great model and has done well, you know, in that conversion to a cooperative. You know, they have more community engagement than they would have had staying as a regular S corporation or whatever they were before. Another conversion where the owner stayed in was a bookkeeper who was doing the books for tons of nonprofits around Worcester. She wanted to grow, but she didn't want to just be doing management and being the boss. So she grew, bringing on other bookkeepers into the cooperative that, you know, got on a membership track, and they manage it together, and they're doing really well since 2016. They took part in the academy and then formed their cooperative, and that's a great example of also growth through conversion to co-ops. But the other one you hear a lot in terms of conversions are retiring business owners, right? So retiring owners, for one example, here in Waltham, Mass, there was a pretty successful landscaping company that was owned by a white woman, and almost all our workers were Latinx folks doing the landscaping. And so, you know, it was a $1 million company that they did a whole transition as that owner retired, to keep some of the culture, but create a whole new culture as they built their co-op and their new management structure, where the workers elect a board, and the board can hire and fire their CEOs, and is in charge of profit sharing and things like that. So it's a really successful co-op that has 31 people in the co-op. 16 of them are worker owners, maybe more by now. This is a couple years old. So the company started in '88, but then they started their conversion in 2014, and now they're really solid in their worker ownership and have built tons of capacity in management and in worker ownership, understanding, and they're training all sorts of people around the country. And they're a big co-op. They're doing, you know, 3-4 million in sales each year, and doing huge hardscaping installations and landscape architecture work around Greater Boston and Metro West areas. So it's a great example of how, you know, instead of that business closing down and those jobs being lost, that they were able to hold on to the jobs and grow the business through converting to a co-op. And there's hundreds of businesses in Massachusetts that are, you know, it's called the silver tsunami is what people are calling it, because of baby boomers who are ready to retire, and maybe are considering selling off their company, maybe are just going to close it, and all those jobs could really be not only saved, but moved into a place where there's worker ownership and there's building of wealth through the ownership and profit sharing in these companies. So, you know, there's folks all over Mass and elsewhere that are reaching out to these business owners and saying, hey, have you considered employee ownership, cooperatives, and there's tax incentives if they want to sell to the workers, and there's usually some sort of financing from the owners and from outside to make that switch over, so that the workers have full ownership within the, you know, 1 year or 2 year kind of period. And just to kind of walk through what that conversion looks like, because I think you haven't talked too much about conversions in the series yet. One, you have to figure out if the seller really wants to sell, you know, and that's important first step. And then you have to figure out whether the employees really want to buy. And those two steps are key, but really big ones. And then before you get too far, you want to make sure that the business is not only viable in its current state, but that it would be with new management. And then before too long, you have to do evaluation. And this is always a tricky one. The seller, the previous owner, often, you know, has a very high picture of what they think their business is worth, and then you have to get an outside valuation and come to consensus on what the business is worth, so you can do a full buyout and sell to the workers. You do a full business plan, a funding plan. There are a lot of funders that really get co-ops and can help you through that. There's a whole national network that can help people in this conversion. It's called Workers to Owners Collaborative. BecomingEmployeeOwned.org is the website. And then you have to, train everyone up and figure out the new management structure and business structure. So, but there's, dozens of great examples. Yard and a half is a good one right here in our neck of the woods, but there's lots all over. There's a lot happening in Maine with this, in California. So if you're a business owner that wants to expand, this is a good option. Or if you know someone who's retiring, this is a good option to talk to them and really move towards employee ownership. So yeah, that's on conversions. I don't know if there are any questions at this point. I'm not monitoring the chat very well.
So Angel says employee ownership is so much better than wealthy people within LLC taking over a business to abuse the workforce. Thank you. I think that was the only comment. Oh, a question. What was the initiative you mentioned between Mondragon and the Steelworkers?
So Mondragon is a network of worker co-ops that has built, they have over 100,000 worker owners in their multiple co-ops in Basque region and all over Spain. And they have started their own bank and university. So a lot of, their staff are looking to support movements elsewhere and really like that worker council kind of model. So they've teamed up with the steelworkers in the US to do union worker co-op development, especially in industrial areas. So Reading, Pennsylvania has some projects, Cincinnati, Ohio, and here in Worcester we have the print shop that's steelworkers owned. And so there's folks at the top leadership of the steelworkers who understand co-ops, who understand worker ownership, and are working with these folks from Spain and Basque Country to really spread the model. So they have some real resources behind that collaboration. So that's an exciting one. And SEIU, Unite Here, lots of other United Food and Commercial Workers are working a lot in the grocery sector to have worker ownership and community ownership. So there's a lot going on. And if, that union council is a good place to connect. Yeah.
Thank you. Hendrix also has a question. Do you have any lessons learned from running co-op academies or any tips?
Yeah, well, we've done 7 of them. So there's lots. The main benefit of them is that cohort model, right? People come in maybe in the idea stage, maybe ready to get their business going, and they can work through some of the issues with other people in that, startup phase. And I think that also poses some of the challenges of co-op academies, that some people are like ready and they have a business plan, and then others are in such idea phase or have, are working 2 or 3 other jobs. So it's really, it's challenging sometimes to get all the way from idea phase into ready to start your co-op. So it's really important from a co-op academy to also have follow-up after the co-op academy. So Worcester Roots is able to incubate 2 or 3 of the graduates of the co-op academy each year, and that's really key. Or to continue with ongoing workshops. So we do, monthly workshops after the co-op academy to stay connected. So those are some things from running the co-op academies. We have all our curriculum online. We developed it with Boston Center for Community Ownership, but then made it totally public so people can take a lot of that curriculum from worcesterroots.org and run with it. So yeah, those are the academies. And the other one to look at, there's been lots of good academies around the country, but the Green Worker Co-ops in the Bronx runs a really successful academy. Theirs is a little bit longer. I think they do maybe 6 or 8 months, and they, people come in with their business idea, usually a cohort of 3, ideally, and they come out with a full business plan and branding and website and, ready to go. So those are some good resources. Let me keep going a little bit, and learning from failure too. So talking about a lot of those co-ops that didn't quite get off the ground, that maybe, went through an academy or two. And that's, there's lots of different challenges. But a frequent one is the failure to build up your core team, right? A lot of solo entrepreneurs have a co-op idea, but don't fully develop their core team or have the trust to really bring people in as full, members of that core team. Or it takes so long to build that core team that people get jaded in the process. So that team building is really a key step and really an early important one. If you have a co-op idea, really build that team, figure out what skills you have, what other skills you need in your core. Another thing is that people often try to really, bootstrap or just start up their co-op without sufficient capitalization. You need a strong business plan, but there are good lenders out there that really get co-ops, and community development financial institutions that are not going to charge you tons of interest, that have really flexible lending, even equity type investments, so things that can wait to, you're profitable to pay off. So, a best practice is to really think about what resources you need to get started, and even to pay yourself as you're starting the co-op, so you can focus on it. There's a launch loan that Cooperative Fund in New England has, where you can use that to start with. Even before you're up and running, you can get a loan to pay yourselves or to do your feasibility analysis or things like that. So that's another key thing, is to be fully capitalized. Look at what it really takes to start a successful business in your industry, and don't skimp. Get the funds behind it and do it really well. The other main area is, and this is not just co-ops, but especially co-ops, is conflict, right? Being ready to deal with conflict and having conflict resolution processes early on in your co-op development is key. And communication, just preempting, and systems of accountability. So you preempt these conflicting situations where, founders are having such conflict with each other that it falls apart before it can fully gel and build a whole culture of and greased wheels getting going. So be ready for conflict, have those conflict resolution processes. There's great co-ops like Aorta .coop that can help people put together their conflict resolution processes, and there's great resources on their website. So here are a few that, had lots of good energy behind it. And Power Energy Co-op, there was a bunch of formerly incarcerated folks involved in starting that, and they were going to do waste vegetable rendering and biofuel production. And it's just it was a really capital intensive industry, and they didn't quite, they got it going a little bit, but it didn't quite get off the ground. A hydroponics co-op in Worcester is still, many years down the road, still not getting going. And a lot of those, for those reasons I just mentioned. But one other reason that co-ops fail is that they try to go alone, or that they're isolated. There's such a great community in Massachusetts of co-ops. Reach out, get connected, and that I'll be sharing some resources and some movement nodes later to connect to. But those are some of the lessons learned. If anyone else has lessons learned they want to shout out or throw in the chat or whatever, this is a good time. Businesses fail all the time. Co-ops fail a little bit less, but they fail all the time as well. So yeah, let me get to some resources and tools then. Well, let's get right into that. So, so incubators and accelerators, I was mentioning how they're great resources. WorcesterRoots.org, we have the Co-op Academy. Start.coop is one that's Boston-based and has some seed funding for their members. That's not just worker co-ops, it's co-ops of all sorts. So that's a great resource. You can apply to be part of that. This one's not co-op focused, but if you have a social enterprise that you're thinking of co-op, Social Innovation Forum, Boston-based as well, is a good resource, and they connect you with all sorts of funding resources and foundations and good things. And if you're thinking of doing a co-op that could benefit from having a platform, so like, Uber is a platform, for example, right? So an online platform that helps the people connect and help make it really convenient for consumers to get your product or service. There's a whole movement of folks in the US that are building these platform cooperatives, and there's a lot more info at platform.coop. So if you're thinking of, an online technology thing that could be useful for your co-op, I'm happy to share this PowerPoint. Maybe the Ujima staff can share it later, and I'll make it public. And then there's lots of support organizations, the US Federation, that this co-op clinic, and that is doing the series with you all, usworker.coop. They do a monthly co-op startup webinar, which is a great resource, especially if you missed Daniel's presentation. The next one is Friday, August 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So Friday, August 7th, 3 p.m., Worker Co-op Startup Webinar. Those are free, great resource to get started. Democracy at Work Institute is kind of the think and do tank of the worker co-op arena, institute.coop. They have a great resource library on their website. Co-op Development Institute does co-op development here in the Northeast. They're really good in the food systems sector. Affordable housing, they've done a ton with resident-owned communities, manufactured housing, trailer park ownership, lots of other kind of co-op development, and they have a great staff and do a lot of work in this region. Boston Center for Community Ownership, people may know Stacy Cordero or Laulio, and they do a lot in Boston. Cooperative Fund in New England not only has loans ready for co-ops, but also has staff that can walk you through the loan application process, the thinking about where you're going to get your financing, and they're building out other technical assistance. And there's lots of others. ICA Group does a lot in industrial or childcare or landscaping arena, so ICA.coop. And there's just so many support organizations around. We're really fortunate here in Massachusetts to have a ton of them. So that's a few tools. This is a tool we're working on right now with a bunch of tech co-ops and other co-op developers. We're calling it launch.coop, and it'll be a place for you to connect with the other people you want to start your co-op with, to connect with lawyers and accountants, to build out your business plan, to get your legal documents going, to do your financial projections, all in a way that really makes it easy and you can do on your phone, your laptop. You can collaborate with people, you can keep your documents. So we're right in the middle of developing this. Hopefully we'll have a beta thing by late this year. But look out for launch.coop and get in touch if you are really interested in that. Legal resources. So when you get started, it's important to connect with lawyers. First of all, in terms of online resources, Sustainable Economies Law Center is a great place to start.
Can I shoot a question before you go on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the question is, when you mentioned earlier that businesses fail as well as cooperatives fail. Now, the primary reason for businesses failing is generally lack of planning and lack of funding. How does that situation square with cooperatives if you have people of like minds thinking about doing joint activity for benefit of community?
Yeah, they fail for similar reasons often, and so that's why I'm sharing all these resources for places to build a strong business plan and a strong financing plan so you can fully, be capitalized to start your business. But co-ops do fail less because there's usually a whole community effort around it, whether it's a group of workers that really, are passionate about the service or goods that they provide, or a whole community that wants access to affordable natural foods and starting grocery co-ops. They fail less because there is this whole community and a desire, because there's so much at stake to create solid business plans and feasibility studies before you get too far into it. So, yeah.
Is there a resource that you can offer? I mean, I'm primarily in business and a business owner, but I've never sort of looked at co-ops intensively. So is there a location we can go and read up on our site that would explain co-ops, the benefits thereof, and so forth, that you would recommend?
Yeah, going back to my resource page, if it's a worker co-op,
I'm thinking more of a housing. I'm thinking more of a housing
co-op.
Yeah.
Yeah, so CDI.coop has a lot of good resources on
CDI?
housing.
Okay, CDI.
Yeah, Cooperative Development Institute.
Okay.
CDI.coop.
Okay.
The International Cooperative Association, ICA.coop, has resources in all sorts of sectors. They do, international advocacy around cooperatives. Yeah, those are good places to start for primers on what cooperatives are and resources to educate your community on them.
Thank you.
Hendricks also recommends the Massachusetts Association of Housing Co-ops in the chat.
Okay.
Great. So back to legal resources. Sustainable Economies Law Center has lots of great resources about, if you're thinking about, sounds like someone needs to mute, maybe. So theselk.org or cooplaw.org are two sites that they run that have a lot of great resources and a lot of how-tos and sample. They have a great sample operating agreement and bylaws that's stick figures and picture for every statute in your bylaws. So that's a great resource. Harvard Transactional Law Clinic can be great for low cost, no cost lawyers, a whole team of students that might work on your project and not only help you incorporate, but maybe get leases together or intellectual property, those kind of things. And Carlos, who used to run the Harvard one, is now going to be working at Suffolk Law. So they have a clinic as well. And there's Carlos's new email. So he's a great resource on worker co-ops, on immigrant co-ops. He's right there in the Boston area. And the U.S. Federation keeps a whole directory of lawyers. If you're ready to look one up and hire a lawyer, there's a directory right there at that link at usworker.coop. And then other places to get free or low cost lawyers for civil rights. They do a lot of work in Boston, connecting you with like a for-profit law firm for free, and the staff really understand co-ops. So for anyone working in low resource communities, that's a great resource. That can be quicker often than getting connected to a law clinic like a group of students. If you're working with students, you have to kind of work on their semester timeline and things, but they can often go above and beyond getting a whole team of students on your project. Other law schools, Greater Boston Legal Services, they have a few people who understand co-ops too. So let me just go into some nodes, movement places to connect. So we've mentioned a few times US Federation. US Federation Worker Co-ops also has councils. I mentioned the Union Co-op Council, but they also have a Racial Economic Justice Council that's thinking specifically about ways of intersecting with Black Lives Matter movements and immigrant justice movements. There's also a Policy and Advocacy Council that's really active. So that's a great place to connect. And the Massachusetts Solidarity Economy Network, ussend.org, and there's great mapping projects and supply chain. Hendrix just dropped a Facebook group for it, for the Massachusetts specific one in the chat. So that's a great way to connect statewide with other people doing co-ops and other solidarity economy work. And then there's an employee ownership group that I know many of you are connected to already. And so economicdemocracy.us has resources there. So there's people that will work in statewide to build, employee ownership and worker co-ops and doing train the trainers and things like that. So there's great places to connect in. Again, if you have an idea, or if you're starting a co-op entity, really, connect as soon as you can. There's so many people that are willing to share their resources and connect with you. The U.S. Federation has this co-op clinic that I'm part of that can connect you with TA, technical assistance. There's also going to be an online conference. The national conference this year is online, September 10th and 11th. Ignore the dates that are on this slide, but it's been moved to during the week. The main days will be the 10th and the 11th. There'll be some additional programming outside of that, but there'll be some amazing speakers from different social movements that are really happening around the U.S. right now, and connecting that to our economic justice work and the co-op development. So yeah, there's ongoing webinars and other things that Democracy at Work Institute and the U.S. Federation put on. So that's what I wanted to share, and happy to answer questions if there's time or other comments that people want to chime in. I'll put my email in the chat so people can feel free to get in touch with me about anything else. Oh, that was private.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. So it looks like when I look at chat, I see Matt's email address, and it looks like there are not any additional questions or comments. So that's right on time. Thank you so much, Matt. This was wonderful. And Sierra, I think you can stop recording now.